the benefit of their views. Stephen, do you want me to read through the names of the whole panel?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay, well, Stephen is the facilitator. He's going to do the Zoom managing, I hope, so I don't need to do that. That's a real progress. And we have Deborah Bland, who's the Global Marketing Manager, BSc in Retail from Diversey. Delia Cannings, who's the National Lead for Education and Training, the Association of Healthcare Cleaning Professionals. David Fuller, who's the Account Director at Brunswick Cleaning and Hygiene Supplies. John Hines, who's the Global RD&E Director at SC Johnson Professional. We have Darren Marston, who's the Chairman and Founder of Industrial Cleaning Equipment Limited. Jim Melvin, who's the Group CEO at the Exclusive Service Group. Kim Phillips, who's the Head of Catering Facilities Services at Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council and the Chair of the Association of Building Cleaning Direct Service Providers. And Jason Towers is Managing Director, Business Services at Mighty Group PLC. So we have, as I say, a panel who are fully expert on all these topics, so we can explore the issue in detail of the vital role that the cleaning and hygiene industry is playing in making all the environments that we're all trying to return to as COVID secure as they possibly can be, so we can boost the public's confidence in returning to workplaces and to hospitality and all manner of other settings. So, Stephen, shall I hand over to you and you can facilitate our question and answers and discussion session? And then you can call upon me for my less expert thoughts whenever you want them.
But thank you, Nigel. Great pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for turning up for our APPG meeting. I think the first thing I'm going to ask the panel is I'm going to put myself into the shoes of the commuter who's using public transport, member of the public, entering and leaving public spaces, anyone that's entering a workplace or any other business premises, someone using leisure facilities or other public buildings. How would I know that the environments that I'm moving in, working in, visiting are clean and safe for me to use? Let me turn to Kim Phillips. Kim, how would you answer my question as a member of the public?
Well, I think the element of confidence of the public as a whole is a challenge. And the experience that they have had throughout this period is basically what we need to understand and take forward. So, for example, the fact or fiction they're exposed to, or what experience they've had generally. I can talk first and foremost, I guess, about the experience in Rotherham and the local authority environment, with the exception of just 2 schools in Rotherham, remained open throughout the last year, through the entire period. And we've been able to do that by ensuring it's a working partnership with both the schools, the local authority, and the staff within the school environments, and most important, obviously, the parents who are dropping their children off on a daily basis. Use of PPE, daytime cleaning, offering visual confidence to boost the physical changes, and one-way systems and so on. The council as well has had their main building, which normally houses about 2,000 staff, open for the staff who are unable to work from home, or it's actually a requirement for them to be in the office environment. So again, a combination of training for the cleaning operatives to ensure that they are confident in the activities that they're undertaking, visual reminders, face coverings, and basically safe systems of work have ensured that confidence in the work environment.
So visibility and communication seems to be a couple of the themes that are coming out from your answer, Kim. I wonder if I can turn to Jason Towes from Mighty. Would you agree with that? Is that something that your business is focused on?
Yeah, I think significantly, Stephen, and I think there's nothing better than actually seeing things done and getting confidence from seeing signage, seeing more cleaning operatives, cleaning technicians out, as they are on the front line, but really seeing them at the front of house and building the confidence with the commuters, the travellers, or the people going to work. I think what also helps is some of the transport companies have been issuing notifications across, using tannoy announcements, using billboards, I think we should see more of that. I think the challenge there is I think people forget quite quickly if it's not visual and people can't see it. But I think also there are new new innovations and new new technology emerging for the cleaning and hygiene sector, particularly around robotics, particularly around UV robotics. But I think also reminding people it's not just surface cleaning, it's not just touch points, it's air quality as well we need to think about. So yeah. I think we'll continue to see more sort of UVC technology around air quality and building confidence in communities.
John Hines from SC Johnson, I mean, one of the issues that I've heard you talk about in the past is this idea of COVID security. Is there such a thing as a COVID secure environment?
That's a good question, Stephen. I think it's a useful terminology because it communicates very clearly what we're seeking to achieve in terms of confidence. But you're right. I do have a fear that it can communicate too much of a black and white situation. And I think for me, and I would just build on what we've already heard from Kim and Jason, I think communication, that visibility is key. What's really important for me is that communication should convey the shared responsibility on both the facility owner and the facility manager, as well as those people using the facility. And I think Kim put it very well when she included parents in the partnership at a school. I think it's as important that people understand that when they go to a facility, the facility can make itself as safe as possible, but they still have a job to do in terms of making sure they look after hand hygiene, making sure they identify the likely moments of risk where it's important to wash their hands or sanitize their hands. And it's really that partnership, recognizing that, if we all do the right things together, then absolutely we can create a very safe and secure environment. But I think the idea that an environment on its own can be COVID secure without recourse to the behavior of the people in it, that does bother me. But I think really communicating that shared responsibility, communicating that hygiene and safety is as much about behavior. And again, I think Jason picked up on it. It's not just surface, it's air quality, it's hands as well. So it's as much about behavior as it is about the environment itself, making sure that we identify those moments and really just emphasizing that shared responsibility. That would be the key points for me.
Are there some sectors of the economy that are more vulnerable to a perceived lack of public confidence as we start up the economy again? Are there some parts of the economy that are going to be particularly vulnerable to this issue of public confidence? Delia, can I turn to you? Have you got any thoughts on that?
I think that in general terms, confidence is eroded across several sectors and several areas. I think one of the big issues that I have come across during this pandemic is there is a distinct lack of understanding in the regards of what cleaning is and what disinfecting is, and therefore a lot of the confidence is eroded because there are folks that think I'll disinfect everything and there are others that think I'll clean everything. But actually training and education is crucial so that we know what we should be cleaning, what we should be disinfecting, and more importantly, what is the difference? We hear quite a lot about fogging and the use of other mediums, but actually it's the education and training to give the confidence that the people carrying out the tasks know exactly what they're doing, that they are trained to do it correctly, that they understand the science behind the principles. And that's where education is crucial, to restore faith and to learn and recover from the lessons that we have learned from where we got it wrong. And that's education and training time and time again. We've learned a lot of lessons during pandemic, and we need now to reinforce them and to cascade them and to recognize our cleaning teams for the people that they are, the environmental ninjas that are providing a wonderful service to protect us and to annihilate the contamination, the enemy that's unseen.
Delia, thank you for that. I'm going to bring in Margaret Ferrier. Margaret asked a really good question on chat. Margaret, if you would unmute and just put your point directly to the panel, it would be very useful.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one of the areas where confidence was quite low, in fact, eroded, was a hospital setting. And I think for those people who maybe would normally have gone to an A&E or gone to the hospital to seek help thought better of it, really, because I think there was this almost, maybe wrongly, this thought that if they went to the hospital, everybody in the hospital was dealing with COVID and that it was widespread instead of, you know, sort of in one area of the hospital that it was being dealt with. So I definitely think a hospital setting was one of them. Where people really, you know, didn't want to kind of go and in fact maybe put themselves in danger because they should have gone with a health complaint that they were suffering from. And another one I think that a lot of people have brought up was at the very beginning in supermarkets, where although people were wearing a mask when they were going into shop, there seemed to be a lack of kind of social distancing in supermarkets, and you could see people kind of stepping back going, oh my God, that person's, you know, everybody fighting for the same package of food on a shelf. And I think that that was quite obvious at the beginning, and maybe even as we went along. So just a couple of thoughts on that.
Margaret, that's very helpful. Thank you, Margaret Ferry. I'm going to go to Craig Whitaker now, another Member of Parliament. Craig, please unmute.
Thank you, Stephen. Just one issue that's come to my attention during the pandemic, and that is one of, without going into too much detail, but I wanted to ask the panel whether they think this is a genuine cause for lobbying government. And basically, I have a publican or a couple of publicans who threw a few £1,000s at making hand gel and sanitizer in the cellar. I also have a very large manufacturer, quite a big name, of hand wipes and sanitizer that spends millions of pounds on testing their product. The legislation currently means that these companies, like this large company, cannot name pathogens that it destroys or is effective against on their packaging, because if they do, it becomes what they call a medicine. And of course, it's not a medicine, but because they list the pathogen, it becomes a medicine. So the MHRA have gone to great lengths during the pandemic to contact not just this one companies, but large companies to get them to strip off the naming of pathogens, hence putting them in the same packaging as that snake oil salesman in my constituency who's making gel and stuff. My question, I suppose, and I am lobbying quite hard the SPADs in Department of Health and Social Care, but I suppose my question to the panel is that do you think, in like such as this case, labeling plays a big part in people's confidence? Because I'm beginning to think it does.
Great question. I'm going to turn to John Hines first on that, and then Deborah Bland. They're our manufacturing specialists on chemicals. John.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you very much for the question also. I think it is an excellent question, and it's an extremely important one. I actually think you framed the situation very well, and I do think that there is an issue to be solved. My perspective, and I think the perspective of our company, would be that we would like products to be marketed on the basis of how they perform. And to your point, we invest a lot of money both in the development of better products with broader efficacy and better efficacy, and in the testing and validation of those products. And I can tell you then, and you'll know from your own constituency company that you know that we are able to provide that testing with with good solid evidence, independent testing. And I think that the right regulatory framework is one that supports that behaviour. In other words, a company that makes those investments, both in development and in testing, should be, I think, truly advantaged versus companies that don't. And I think that's in the interest of a fair market. I think that's in the interest of a vibrant, innovation-based industry, and I think it's also in the interest of consumers and customers. The one additional point I would make, and I think it's really interesting through this pandemic, is that because such regulations doesn't exist or doesn't adequately exist, public health officials and public health authorities have been reduced to recommending to the general public and to facilities products based only on very, very broad ingredient-based strategy. So use an alcohol hand gel, which of course is an incredibly broad statement. There are many, many different alcohol hand gels. They're not all the same. You know, wash with soap and water, use an alcohol hand gel is really ineffective public health messaging. It can be much better. The testing is available. The testing is performed. What we need is the ability to adequately communicate that through our messaging. So completely support your perspective on this.
A very strong theme of visibility and communication and everything
Absolutely.
that's been said so far. Deborah, please.
I can concur with John. We have seen over the last year that there have been many companies out there that have been making these hand gels that really weren't efficacious at all, and we're not doing anything to prevent the spread of the virus. And as John has said, you know, if you're a global company, a large company locally that know what they're doing, that are doing the right research and development and creating the right products that you need, then I think that's exactly what you need. But we have to be very careful about the labeling and the ingredients that go into hand gels and all sorts of disinfectants. And certainly our company, same as John's, ensure that we provide the right products that are efficacious, do the job and kill the virus.
So you are both being very encouraging to Craig's point about labeling. And let's go back to Margaret's point. Sorry, a question coming in from Jim. Let's get Jim's question in first, Jim Shannon.
Okay. Stephen, a very quickly question. It's in relation to the GP surgeries. I think my constituents, and I believe that everybody else's, probably wish to be able to return to their surgeries in the near future as perhaps they did in the past. It's very regulated at this moment in time because, and I understand because of the COVID-19 and the regulations, etc. But how can we, when I say we, how can government convince the GPs that the return to normality means people actually attending their GP surgeries and not doing a Zoom call or a telephone call? So to do that, what do we need to do to convince the GPs?
So that's two questions from Margaret and now from Jim Shannon about this issue of healthcare, hospitals and GPs. Who would like to come in and answer that from the panel? Can I have somebody to volunteer to answer that point? Inspiring confidence to revisit healthcare. Yes, Jason. Jason Price from Nike.
I'll probably hope to answer it partly. I think to Margaret's point earlier around hospitals and those kind of environments being overrun. Look, I think the public have a huge part to play here as well, because you know, we can apply a multi-layered approach to any environment, whether it be visible cleaning, whether it be disinfectant, whether it be UV or air quality. But sometimes it is the way that the visitors behave, and I think there's a huge responsibility on the people visiting some of these environments. And I think we need to make, you know, we shouldn't make any apologies for applying probably a little bit more rigor around our communication of how people should behave when they attend some of these environments, around personal hygiene and their responsibility to keeping these places safe as well. I work in, you know, I work with people that work in healthcare environments, and their focus is on responding to the people that visit those, you know, these locations. And I think a lot of the areas that, you know, we fall down in terms of losing confidence is the way people behave, and that's also been demonstrated when there's been certain relaxation of you know, of lockdown rules, where people are visiting parks and just badly, you know, behaving badly. And I think that has a massive impact on confidence as well. I think in terms of GP surgeries, I think you know, I have a slightly different view as well. I think some of the online GP services that are provided today, I think, are outstanding. I've had sort of feedback from employees that work for me are sometimes better than the service they get face to face, really. So I think just continuing to apply a multi-layered approach, reminding people of how they behave, I think goes a long way.
Jim's point and Margaret's point is that the people, I mean, all aspects of government, including the health service, need to take responsibility for inspiring the public to believe that they can return to places like GP surgeries and hospitals, right? Otherwise, people are just going to stay away, and that'll be more self-harming. Do you agree with that, Jason?
Yeah, I do, and I think look, I've tried to visit my GP. I've been in touch with my GP, and a continuous drumbeat of publicising and making people aware of the multi-layered approach to what they're doing to install that confidence to allow people back into those environments. And I think, look, I dread to think that there's a GP surgery anywhere in in the UK today that's not making those assurances available to people. But I think,
going to bring in Mark Pawsey MP. He's got a question. He knows a bit about this industry. We were both in the industry for a while. Mark Pawsey.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, we were talking about supplies to the sector, and as somebody who used to supply the sector years and years ago, I'm interested in knowing whether the sector has been able to get effective supplies. We know that in the early days of the pandemic, things like PPE, we had no domestic UK manufacturers. We were in a big queue to get stuff in, and I hear all sorts of accounts about price gouging. Has that now come to an end? Are you paying more on a permanent basis, and is the sector able to pass that cost through to your clients?
Dave Fuller is, I think, the best person here on this panel to answer that. Dave Fuller of Bunzl.
What an absolutely cracking question. I mean, because if you went back a few months, it was, trying to get supplies was a real challenge. And I think coming back to one of the points as well, was they correctly manufactured and correctly labelled? There was all sorts of products being bandied about, which were, for even PPE products, which didn't have the correct labelling. So I think going back a few months, a real challenge to get the correct products. Has it stabilised now? I think yes, it has to a point, but there's still a long way to go within that. I think when it comes to a cost point of view, the pricing has stabilised, across quite a lot of the products now. You'll still see some challenges there within the prices, but I think going back to the point of actually managing to source the products and make sure we can get a real genuine supply to our customers. Like I say, it was a real challenge, but thankfully, as a business, Bunzl Cleaning and Hygiene Supplies, we had a real good supply portfolio. We put various steps in place to make sure that we could procure the products professionally and properly. And then, like I say, ongoing, there are still challenges, but yes, in answer to your question, we have certainly made sure we can supply the correct products.
And were you able to pass on the additional costs to your customer, and was the contract cleaner able to pass on the costs to their client?
Yes, in part, because the main thing, the fundamental thing you had to do, and I think it goes back to this confidence point, is that you had to ensure that premises were cleaned properly and professionally. So the first thing is you have to make sure you procured that product at the best price that it could be procured at, and then if needs be, we had to pass that pricing on, or the contract cleaner had to pass that pricing on. Yes, that was happening, and it's still happening.
Dave, I saw Darren. He was gesticulating that he perhaps had a different point of view. Darren Marston.
You don't miss a trick, Stephen, do you? Being restrained there. I was actually making a note there to see if we had a chance to revisit Mark Pawsey's fantastic question. And my perspective is I think the supply chain has done a fantastic job of actually maintaining the stream of supplies of cleaning equipment and materials, certainly. I mean, there were the days of the Wild West, as I think, sort of back in March, April, maybe a bit of May last year. But after that hiatus, I think the likes of Bunzl and others have done a fantastic job of delivering supply and actually maintaining a price, because I don't think our sector, certainly for the past generation, has been able to accommodate price increases either directly or indirectly, and that for me is part of the problem in terms of investment. So I think the price suppression being part of the cause of the holding back of the cleaning sector generally. So that's why there was a little shake of the head.
That is quite a powerful point. That deserves a meeting in its own right, that last point that you made. I can tell you from my own career, that is a cracking point to have made. I'm going to bring in Lorcan, because Margaret Ferrier put a post up about UK source manufacturing, because there's definitely been this sprouting up of all these different companies manufacturing in the UK. Lorcan, would you like to make your point?
Yeah, I think the country was caught very much napping on manufacturing PPE in the UK. The procurement behaviour of the last 10 or 15 years has driven down the cost of all of these items, making it uneconomical to make in the UK. So we found ourselves in a situation where all aprons, all polythene aprons were sourced in the Far East and had been for 7 to 8 years. And when push came to shove, there was literally no indigenous manufacturing left in the UK. And it was a testament, obviously, to all the companies that got on board to make aprons in the UK and turned around their factories, etc. What we would hope has come out of this is a direction of travel from government, that they when they're putting the frameworks together on these contracts, that it's not 90% price and 10% non-financial, that there is some national security to be built into contracting for NHS items, and that what we're seeking is that a proportion of goods are made and sourced in the UK that are critical to the national interest. And something as innocuous as a disposable polythene apron was seen as the thing that saved people's lives. So we do hope something comes out of this, and there will be frameworks out in the next 6 months. So we will see if the direction of travel has changed. So I think that pans out for a lot of the PPE items. So we shall see, Stephen.
And it's not just a lesson of the pandemic, it's a lesson of many events leading up to the present day, that driving costs down, the race to the bottom, the race to zero, has not served us well as a country. I think that would be my view. I'm going to kind of direct a question at Jim Melvin now. He's been sitting there, he's not working hard enough, so I'm going to ask him a question. There was a really interesting article in the Sunday Times last weekend from Dominic Lawson, which I think we need to address, because we're talking about confidence, we're talking about readiness for people to go back to work, back to public spaces. Dominic Lawson's article, I think, raised a lot of really powerful questions. Why don't you comment on that? Because I know you've got strong views about it.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I read the article on Sunday, which was, I think, chosen narrative. There was the use of phrases such as tests have been rigged, and we would be sort of incessant cleaning of desks would be foisted upon people. And the sort of added piece about if it saves a lot of lives, then it's an inconvenience that should be endured. But what if it doesn't? And then it went on to talk about some cases. So there was a project by Emmanuel Goldman. But what frustrated us as a group was that the elements that Mr. Lawson chose were clearly chosen to form the narrative, in my opinion, because the document also said that super spreading is the issue that happens, and super spreading isn't happening on door handles. Well, that might be the case, but it assumes that there's only one way of transmitting, and that simply isn't true. They then went on to say, wondered if the obsession with the possibility in the UK stems, if only subconsciously, from the Salisbury Novichok incident, which I thought was a bit scaremongering. I mean, to try and draw the nonsense of that in comparison to what we've just gone through in the last year. He talked about the British Medical Council. The British Medical Council report actually said that whilst the transmission from hard surfaces was possibly less, nevertheless, it was a distinct possibility. And in fact, it would be transmitted where people particularly had coughs or sneezes within 1 or 2 minutes. Now, given some of the buildings that we look after as an industry and the amount of people that we look after, it's hard not to imagine that from significant amount of time, there are people in that position. And they went on to say that the British Medical Council were more or less walking away from it. The issue also is, of course, air quality, water and ventilation. And all of these have got to be looked at as well. So the British Medical Council actually said, should heed the science, focus the efforts on airborne transmission, but also ensure that touch points are cleaned. Lastly, he quoted the CDC in America. If you look at the CDC, it goes on to say that we should clean and disinfect frequently touched surfaces such as tables, doorknobs, light switches, etc., etc. And finally, doesn't the view expressed not actually go against the advice and the processes that the NHS and healthcare workers have been following? And lastly, I would argue that it goes against the government's own advice on hands, face, space, with hands being the most important elements in relation to touch points. I think it was an unfortunate piece of narrative, and I think it was unnecessary. So I hope that answers your question, Steve.
Jim, that was that was a very precise, very careful rebuttal. But I'm just going to ask. I think John Hines may want to comment on that. He's got concerns in that direction as well, haven't you, John?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, I would completely agree with Jim. With everything that Jim's put forward. The particular point I wanted to make, I read the article as well, and I do think there is, as often with these things, there's a nuance. I think there is an issue to raise, which is with what's been termed hygiene theatre. So the idea of, as was said in the article, incessantly cleaning desks, or I think Delia raised earlier, fogging and things like that. I think we as an industry would recognise that these things are unnecessary. They, in my view, they sent the wrong type of confidence and reassurance, because this is putting reassurance, visual reassurance, before scientific reassurance. And I think Delia made an excellent point earlier, which is about the professionalism of the cleaning and hygiene sector. That this is a sector where people know what their jobs are, and their jobs are around identifying those points of high risk, which Jim has articulated extremely well, which the CDC and the government agree with: frequently touched surfaces and so forth, hands, face and space. And so from my perspective, I would agree that hygiene theatre is something that we should challenge, and we should ensure that the public don't equate hygiene theatre with genuine reassurance. But I would make the distinction between hygiene theatre and hygiene. Hygiene is the right thing to do, and specifically targeted hygiene, identifying those points of risk and addressing those points of risk through a combination of surface disinfection and application of hand hygiene at the right moments. I think that can go a long way to creating a healthy society. And the final point I'd like to make here, and it brings up that point of COVID versus Novichok, two extremely specific infections, one of course responsible for a global pandemic, the other responsible for a highly publicized issue in Salisbury. But of course the reality, as healthcare workers know and have known for many years, is that there are many different pathogens and many different infections and many different transmission pathways. So let's not make it all about Novichok or all about COVID, but let's put in place the behaviors in the future that will lead to a more healthy society, a more sustainably healthy society. And hygiene, targeted hygiene and not hygiene theatre, has to be at the centre of that.
So Jim wants to come back in on that, but before Jim comes back in on that, I'm going to add to a question to Jim, which is about readying workplaces and workspaces for people to return to them. I'd like to hear your comment on what it means to be ready in that context. Jim.
Everybody really concerned, Stephen, that there's maybe a significant number of companies that possibly aren't ready. We asked earlier about sectors, so I would obviously add to that, along with healthcare and retail, that Margaret brought up, transport, public gatherings, arts, hospitality, events, sport, accommodation, tourism are all obvious ones that spring to mind. But there's also a concern that we haven't really talked on, that we need to talk to government about, because due to cash flow, funding, revenue, there's a concern that companies may defer to assuming that, for instance, that incubation maybe suffice, or mothballing maybe suffice. And as we said earlier, we should be looking, Delia touched on it, I think, about ventilation, water supplies, air quality. But do clients actually know, as John's just alluded to? And we haven't touched on people. So you've also got to take into account things like availability, skills, or skill fade, as people are calling it now, fitness, well-being, vulnerability, confidence, mental health. These are all vital. So I think in terms of readiness, to answer your question, Stephen, clients should be encouraged to be working with their suppliers, with the associations. In my own case, it would be the CSSA and the BCC. Building operators should be encouraged to be looking at some of the very many and excellent training programs that have been brought to bear in terms of disinfection and sanitisation. The training a lot that we do along with our manufacturers. Darren touched on it earlier, who have come up with some fantastic innovations. And we touched on the PPE. And I think I shared Darren's comment. I think it's one of the successes of the industry through the pandemic that we have been able to actually supply PPE when, as you rightly say, Mark already brought this up, 80% was taken for all the right reasons, but it was taken. So there's a huge perception element. And people should not be worried about talking openly. There won't be a contractor or a supplier on this call that hasn't had letters or emails from their clients saying how wonderful the people, the cleaning and hygiene operatives have been. So the expertise sits around this table, sits within this industry. Please use it. It's there for a reason, and help people to get ready. And that's what we're talking about today, helping people to get ready and recognizing the actual amount of work that needs to be done to do so.
I'm going to turn to Jason. Jason, mighty, huge business. I mean, what are you doing to advise and prepare clients for reopening their premises?
I think there's a little bit of a summary here, but I think, look, we're doing everything that all other reputable businesses are doing in terms of communication, in terms of focusing on responsibility and accountability. But what we are talking to our customers about is delivering a more smarter and intelligent way to deliver hygiene in the workplace to help our people get back to work. We're helping them with education and training people as well as our clean operatives. We're helping them think about, don't think about a budget and just spending the budget and putting 4 or 5 cleaning operatives at the front of a building, to quote John's point around hygiene theatre, because actually installing the systems and focusing on air quality is far more cost effective and far more effective in terms of dispelling some of the challenges we come up against in hygiene than it is to put people at the front cleaning touch points all the time. And I think overall, what we have done and we're continuing to do is to reiterate the professionalism and the need for the hygiene sector, as opposed to probably a grudge service in the past. This is absolutely a sector and a service and a group of people that's essential, because finally, Stephen, this is not a moment in time. This is a change in culture of how people are going to work in the future. It's a changing culture of how people are going to travel, a changing culture of how they're going to behave. So a lot of what we've done recently is going to change the way we do things in the future.
That point, Jason, about what has the pandemic changed? I mean, what has it changed in terms of how we prioritize health and well-being in any environment outside of the home? Maybe I can ask Dave Fuller maybe to comment on that. What has the pandemic changed forever?
I think it goes back to, I just want to go back to Jason's point, when he mentions that people forget quite quickly. And this is not the time to forget. I think in terms of the pandemic, it certainly changed our behaviour on how we wash our hands, and we have to sanitize our hands, obviously with the correct product. But we have to now ensure that ongoing, that we really do change the behaviour of how we as people actually act within the environment, in every building we go into, how we travel, on a daily basis. It's very, very important, because it comes back to my point that, a pet just isn't for, for Christmas, it's for life. And that is really how we should be treating this pandemic, really look after ourselves and really change our culture, really believe we are at a crucial stage. And this is, for really people now to really start acting on, like I say, on their behaviour.
let me turn to Deborah and ask her what specifically is Dave alluding to there in terms of preventative safeguarding. What are the specific behaviours we're talking about?
I think the behaviours come from both the employers, the staff, the workers, the public. Really, everybody that's around really has an element and a part to play. We need to be ensuring that we still think of hands, face, space. I mean, that's still key in this area. But if we go back to sort of this time last year and we think about how the pandemic's changed everything, you know, we were just going into a lockdown. We were having some time at home. The sun was shining. We thought we'd have 3 weeks off and it would be wonderful. But, you know, over the course of the last 15 months, we've seen that people are now been at home for solidly for that time. They are frightened to go out. Some have got a fear of, obviously, ill health. But others, I think, are unsure of what to expect out there and how to behave. Mm-hmm. Because we have seen so many different of what we should be doing out there. Some people are following the rules, some are not. You know, and if we look at the loneliness and mental well-being out there, a recent report of the ONS said that 29% of students reported feeling lonely or often or always last month. You know, and the HSE states that it's going to be difficult for people to return to the workplace because of workplace stress. So, you know, I think mental health, mental well-being is really key for us to really focus on now, you know, and really bring that confidence back.
And what about so Margaret Ferrier, one of our MPs, is asking a question about wearing of masks. I mean, in the future, I mean, there's no question, is there, that the wearing of masks this winter has cut down on cold and flu, right? I think that's an accepted statistical fact. I mean, so do you see people continue to wear masks? I mean, it was a feature of if anyone ever traveled to the Far East, I mean, that was a feature of everyday life, people wearing masks. Are we going to have that in the UK? Do you see that as being a regular safeguarding measure people will take? Deborah?
Personally, I do. Yes, and that's my personal view. I think it's something that was here to stay in the Far East. It's continued. We all know that we have issues around airborne illnesses. And, you know, this is not just about COVID. This is about keeping people safe. It's about healthy workplaces, healthy people, healthy premises. You know, and we're not just looking at, you know, a coronavirus. We are very clearly looking at other pathogens of concern. You know, it could be noroviruses, it could be bacteria, it could be, you know, spores like C. difficile. There's a whole gamut. It's not just a coronavirus. And I think that actually, if we can see instances of flu reduction, as we have done over the past year, we've seen a reduction in the number of colds. I actually think that the wearing of masks, albeit a pain for most, will remain for quite a while, and certainly in enclosed spaces.
Jim, I saw Jim Melvin, he was gesturing, he was agreeing with what you were saying. It was a polite gesture, Jim.
Well, maybe. I think it is here, and I think it will ultimately become a little bit of choice, but I think most people will follow what Deborah's just said, and will wear masks, especially anyone who's got any immunity concerns or the well-being concerns. And I think it will be more accepted by people. I saw Margaret's note there, and it's very important to recognise it, especially in travel, especially in aircraft, in those sort of areas. It will be, and again, I just think it will become more accepted.
Yeah, I'm going to turn to Nigel, the chair of the APPG. Maybe he can give his view on what he thinks will change in terms of people's behaviour. But while we're at it, Nigel, how do you change people's behaviour on a more permanent, sustainable basis? That's a bit of a question, isn't it?
Yeah, well, thanks to John Hines, I think I've spent loads of time on hand washing and sanitising in hospitals. I mean, I wonder if when we set this session up, we thought the problem would be getting people's confidence back so they would go to places. And now, a week on from pubs opening, I'm thinking that perhaps our issue will be getting people to remember there's still a problem out there, and that this won't all have gone away on June the 21st, and people still need to be cautious and not think life is completely back to normal, because I sense we may be heading in that direction at the moment. I think we ought to be clear, as people have said, that COVID is not the only problem out there. And so it's right that we advertise caution, that we want people to keep doing hands, face, space, and make sure we're not reversing straight back into lockdown when we hit the autumn again. But we should be just recognising the tremendous reduction in cases of flu and other illnesses. And actually, if that is where hand sanitising and other sensible behaviours can make a real difference to all our health, let alone all the potential for improvements in health settings, that would be a rare positive to come out of this pandemic. And I think those are the messages we should be trying to get. We shouldn't get too fixed on whether you can catch COVID by not sanitising your pork chops when you buy them from Tesco or something. But the fact is that being clean and hygienic can improve your health and improve your family's health and the whole community's health. And I think that is something that hopefully we've got ourselves out of the bad habits that we were creeping into for probably years and years and years, and hopefully we've now got ourselves into some better habits. But I would fear that people will just gradually slide back to where they were before unless there's some intervention that keeps reminding them, or they perceive a real need that COVID's coming back. We'll all forget and go back to our old bad ways, and that's just human nature, isn't it?
Does government have a role to play in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably people are a bit sick of government playing roles for the year. But the amount of times even heard today, we've heard quoted hands, face, space. So you get it right, you can reach into the psyche and plonk something there that people do remember. So there probably is a continuing. I don't think anybody thinks COVID does finish on June the 21st and we can all go back completely to normal. I sense we're going to have booster jabs and we'll have cases start to pick up a bit, that we will need those messages reinforcing. So I will be active in this space as government will be active across public health issues, but we don't forget about this, move on to obesity and healthy eating and forget all about this agenda until something goes wrong. Just to stay reminding people that this is an important issue that we all need to stay focused on.
I want to thanks Nigel. I want to turn the discussion now for the last few minutes to what this all means for the cleaning and hygiene industry. This is the APPG for the industry. What has the industry learned from this experience? What changes for the cleaning and hygiene sector because of the experience of the last 12 months? I'll start with Jim Melvin. Jim.
I think there's 4 or 5 things, Stephen, that we've learned, and I hope the first one doesn't sound particularly arrogant, especially to our parliamentary colleagues. I think we've learned that we've got an even more important place in society, and it's been tangibly and unequivocally demonstrated. So, and also that our cleaning and hygiene operatives are more skilled and more important than ever. I think we've learned that robust, strong and agreed cleaning and hygiene schedules, as opposed to what we've heard today in terms of hygiene theatre, is fundamentally required, and that we should be driving that forward along with government to our clients. We've talked about the need for uniformity of training, accreditation for the industry in terms of the apprenticeship levy, and recognition of cleaning and hygiene operatives is surely long overdue as being key to things like this. I think we've also learned, more importantly, that whilst this was about COVID-19, it won't be the first and it won't be the last. So what we don't deal with today, we pay for tomorrow. And so training standards have to increase to include disinfection, sanitisation control. The innovations that Darren talked about earlier all include that going forward. And it encourages our clients and operators to view the process from a health perspective as well as from a cost. And lastly for me, and again, I hope this doesn't sound twee, I think we've learned that we owe our cleaning and hygiene operatives a great deal for their work and their bravery. These operatives, some full-time, but in many cases part-time, have gone to work on social hours continuously, bravely throughout this pandemic. And as I said earlier, we've all had emails and letters from clients saying how wonderful people have been. And now is the time for the country to say thank you and recognise them, women and men. So there's an awful lot has been learned out with all the innovations and the training elements that we've talked about and will continue to talk about.
But the industry, you're talking there about the industry recognising the value of itself and also of its workforce. You specifically mentioned the cleaning operatives.
Absolutely.
What's the industry going to do change, to make the change in the perception of the public about cleaning and hygiene more permanent and sustained? Can I actually turn to Kim, because I know that Kim's done quite a bit of work on that, and then maybe to Delia.
Well, I think if what I would just like to share is my workforce in Rotherham. As you can imagine, this time last year in March, I'd got 600 plus very anxious, very nervous, very concerned cleaning operatives being asked to go out there and do the job on the front line, and they were anxious. We trained them in line with Delia's advice and in instruction. We trained them. They were then understanding. They went from anxious to understanding, and then they actually then got their celebrity status, because everybody all of a sudden they were experts. It was lovely, very celebrity experts. But what I've seen more than anything throughout the different areas of the cleaning is they no longer say, I'm only a cleaner. And I think that's wonderful. And I think that's just one thing that we've been able to achieve, and I will continue to achieve, because they're no longer only a cleaner. They understand the part they played. They are very, very both happy and proud of the part they played. And I think that what we need to do is embrace this throughout the country and ensure that we can continue to understand and take this forward, both with the apprenticeship levies and everything that the other areas of the sector have been trying to achieve for a very long time.
And the industry is committed to investing in its people. Is that right, Delia?
Oh, absolutely. I echo Kim's sentiments there. The cleaning teams who have worked tirelessly to help us into this recovery position are now being recognised for the skill base they truly own. And these people need to be supported further by government through the levy, through training and education, to give them the credentials to recognise how good they are. They are now being clapped for, they're being told they're wonderful, they feel recognised. And that is absolutely wonderful, because for too long, as Kim said, I'm only the cleaner, but now I'm only the environmental ninja. I am supporting the battle. I'm protecting the nation. You need me, and I need to be trained. So we need to jump on board the levy. We need to push government to help us to support these people who are going to support us, and we are going to win. Cleaning technicians are vital. Education is crucial, and together we can do it.
I love that, Delia. That's great. And Darren Yates, in the same spirit. There have been a lot of interesting chat stuff appear during the course of last hour. Darren Yates, one of his points is, and he makes a lot of good points, but one of them is, I think no more hidden workforce, but visible and essential workforce, which seems to be the theme. And in terms of innovation, let's talk about cleaning company innovation as we bring our hour to an end. Charlotte Parr, you wanted to say something about that, yes?
Yes, thank you ever so much, Stephen. I think that actually is crucial for us moving into the next stage. I think innovation in what we do and making sure that as a collective that are responsible for people feeling confident going out into the working environment, that is absolutely where we need to be as a team. And although I absolutely agree with you about theatre, I do think we have our part to play to show people what we're doing and demonstrate the proof of concept of what we do every day, clarifying that and showcasing that to people so that we can bring people back together with confidence. And that is all by making sure that we're like utilising the latest technology available, be that tech, be that product through the amazing supply chains we've heard today, or the processes we use, but really working together to showcase all of that.
Charlotte, fantastic. Let's talk about products. There's been some chat about products in the chat to go with this. We don't have time to go into all of that right now, but Darren, maybe I can turn to you and ask you about innovation. Your company is an innovator. What's the future for cleaning technology?
I think the fantastic thing of this exchange has been the word change and how often the word change has been used, because personally I've kind of moved away from the word innovation over the past 12 months and into change, because it feels to me like our industry has been pushing innovation for some considerable time. But again, without overplaying the point, due to a lack of investment, it's been difficult to execute some of that innovation. Now, I think so many of the points that we talked about, and I'll just pick on one specific, which is the surface transmission point. I mean, of course, we saw some hysteria a year ago, but things have settled down now, and we understand, we expect a higher standard in terms of surface cleanliness. Now, whether that's in terms of methodology, quantification, or measurement, we need to be able to afford to clean better. And those of us that have visited the odd train carriage toilet or motorway service station toilet, I think we'd all find it difficult to argue that standards need to be increased, whether it be coronavirus, Novichok, or any pathogen that's been talked about. So the challenge, and for me, the most powerful point of this whole debate, is where do we find the ability to afford change and improvement? And I think somebody mentioned, is it something for government? Should some of the investment that we've seen, this huge investment in terms of wrestling this pandemic, does it come from the government? But one thing's for sure, what we do need to do is to change the way we go about some of our business to ensure that we achieve real-time efficiencies to enable us to clean what is important.
Darren, I think that's a fantastic comment to end on. Your comment on products, your product, and the whole view we take of everything that we've experienced in the last 12 months. James White on the chat, he says that agreeing with Delia that cleaning needs to be a profession with recognised qualification. It seems to me like we're ending the hour on a really positive note about how the industry feels about itself and what the next 12 months and 5 to 10 years can mean in terms of transformative change, to use Darren's preferred word, as far as it impacts the industry. Thank you to all of our panel, and thank you to the industry members who've attended today, and thank you to our members of Parliament who've attended. It's been fantastic to have so many of you here, and I'm going to hand straight away back to our chairman, Nigel Mills.
Well, thanks, Stephen, for your arranging the event and for your facilitating it. I think you managed to manage all the 60 or so participants very effectively. I think, can we just thank everybody on the panel for their contributions and see you all for the next event. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel.
Thank you. Bye.